just to read it at night because I won't go to sleep.
Yeah, but if a book is really exciting, I've had that because I've talked to like Rachel Coker who reads to fall asleep. But there's certain books that will wake me up. I cannot read them if I want to fall asleep. I have to stop reading them and think about something else because it's too exciting.
Elsie, that's a great cartoon you posted about the mailbox.
The mailbox. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Who said that? Oh, yeah.
I just looked at it.
So I'm going to get started with what I wanted to share with you tonight, and I'm going to get it up on my screen so I can share it with you. Last night I spoke about the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment for women's suffrage. And so what I wanted to do this evening was tell a few more of the stories of some of the Jewish women involved with it. So this is the issue of Hadassah magazine, and it came out, it was the July-August issue. And so a lot of the material that I'm sharing with you is from here, and I did some additional research. So the person who put this together was Hillary Daniilova for Hadassah magazine, and she cited 3 different historians who I will be mentioning. One of them is Melissa Clapper, who wrote the book Ballots, Babies, and Banners of Peace, American Jewish Women's Activisms from 1890 to 1940. Pamela Nadell, who I have heard on some other topics, who is a leading Jewish historian and the author of America's Jewish Women, A History from Colonial Times to Today. She's at American University and heads their Judaic Studies Department. And Judith Rosenbaum, who's a historian who heads the Jewish Women's Archives in Massachusetts. And I used some pieces from there. They have a Jewish Women's Encyclopedia on their website. So you can look up a lot of different people and learn more about them. If you want to fill in the background about people that you sort of know of but don't really know, and you want to know more about them. So that is always an option. So I wanted to share with you this evening a bit more about some of the women. 2 of the women I did mention last night from the beginning of the struggle. Anna Politzer, who was a granddaughter of a Prague rabbi, and she was teaching Hebrew school in Charleston, South Carolina in the early 20th century, and went from there to working alongside Alice Paul, one of the leaders of the National Women's Party, who seems to have been anti-Semitic, or many people saw her as that. So as a member of the white-clad Silent Sentinels, this in-your-face National Women's Party protest group, Politzer pestered President Wilson's White House until she was dragged off by police. So her other claim to fame is championing the artwork of her Columbia University Teachers College classmate, Georgia O'Keeffe. So flesh out a little more about some of these other people. So we may be more familiar with Ernestine Rose, who was also the daughter of a rabbi, a 19th century rabbi from Poland, and she reinvented herself as an American atheist freethinker and a colleague of the leading social reformer, Susan B. Anthony. So she described herself as a feminist from the age of 5, and she lectured on abolitionism before becoming the president of the National Women's Rights Convention in the 1850s. So Rose was really considered an anomaly because there were very few non-white Anglo-Saxon Protestant women in the movement in the 1850s. So from its beginning in 1848 at the New York Seneca Falls Convention, there was really quite a complexity to the movement and to women's activism, as the elites in America are challenged by the dramatic transformations in American society. So against the waves of immigration and the free exchange of ideas worldwide from that, Jewish women were key mobilizers for suffrage. Activists, often dressed in white, shouted from soapboxes, organized marches, including a 1913 staged procession in front of the White House, including floats and horses, of which there are pictures and posters about you can still find. They wrote letters to editors and politicians, and they even went on hunger strikes that resulted in being force-fed by police. By grabbing headlines with their stunts, suffragists hoped to extend to all American women the right that some had enjoyed in limited instances since the 1830s, when parts of Kentucky were the first in the nation to allow female taxpayers, who would be widowed property owners, for instance, to vote in school elections. A century ago, the rhetoric ranged from garden variety snubbery and blaming Jewish voters for defeated referenda to complex theological arguments that essentially took down religion as being patriarchal and blamed it all on the Jews. So the Woman's Bible, a notorious title by the influential suffragist Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and her anti-religious stance is why she's not going to be on the dollar, and it will be Susan B. Anthony. That was a comment by one of the historians that I was mentioning from Clapper, that it really tarnished her legacy. So it was one thing for individual Jewish women to make common cause with anti-Semites, but it was another for Jewish organizations to lend formal support. So the National Council of Jewish Women was crawling with suffragists, but the organization never endorsed suffrage. There were constant reminders that Jews were seen as not really truly American and not good enough. So collectively, there was this feeling, well, they don't really want us. Hadassah also declined involvement in the cause, and the exception was in 1918, when there was a telegram from the Hadassah organization to President Wilson urging him to support the women's vote. Hadassah was more focused on issues in then Palestine, where Zionist women looked to American suffragists as inspiration for an egalitarian state. But there were many Hadassah women who were devoted to the vote, and this include Rachel Sold, who her last name was Jastrow, her married name. So Rachel Sold Zastrow was a sister of Hadassah's founder, Henrietta Sold, and they and their 6 sisters were all, of course, rabbis' daughters as well. So Rachel represented the Wisconsin Women's Suffrage Association at the state legislature. Rose Jacobs and Irma Lindheim were 2 early Hadassah presidents who advocated for suffrage in between their trips to Palestine. So as I mentioned last night, Jewish women helped to bridge the class divide, helping working class women understand why it was worthwhile to work with upper class women to get the vote, and helping upper class women to understand why having the vote would be an important tool to protect women of all classes. So in some families, this suffrage united the generations, a phenomena echoed at rallies today when mothers and daughters march in solidarity, and sometimes grandchildren as well, around issues like anti-Semitism, reproductive rights, or racial justice. So in the frontier West, Hannah Marks Solomons, whose family founded San Francisco's Congregation Emmanuel, she lobbied for women's rights alongside her daughter, Selena Solomons, who did her mother proud as a key player in California's 1911 referendum that brought suffrage to women in California. The Solomon story tells us how the movement appealed to various generations. It was also a lightning rod in some circles, much like abortion is today. So I really want to focus on the story of the Nathan family. Maud Nathan lent her societal influence to the suffrage movement. So the 2 sisters, there was a family with 4 children, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, were Maud Nathan and Annie Nathan Meyer. And she was the founder of Barnard College. So how elite were they? Maud Nathan was a card-carrying member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they traced their ancestry back to the colonial era. Their cousins were Emma Lazarus, the poet who wrote the New Colossus, and Supreme Court Justice Benjamin Cardozo. So let me tell you a little bit more about them and their family ties as well. So Maud really was a social reformer and a political activist, but she lived 2 distinct lives. So she was born in 1862 into the distinguished Gershom Mendez Sykes family of pre-colonial times, an old New York Sephardic family. So she had relatives who fought in the American Revolution. And she had a very privileged childhood. Her parents were Annie Augusta Florence and Robert Weeks Nathan. Her older brother was Robert Florence Nathan, and her younger brother Harold Nathan, and her younger sister Annie Nathan Meyer. So the family was in New York, and with some financial downturns, they moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin for 4 years. And then Maud finished her high school education in the local public high school there, along with her younger brother. They then moved to Chicago with their mother, and when she died, returned to New York, living with their maternal grandmother and then their father. 2 years later, at age 17, she married her 35-year-old cousin, Frederick Nathan, and embarked on life as a society wife. And she served various charitable causes, and it was said that she was the life of every party she attended. She and her husband summered in Saratoga Springs, New York, where she was renowned for her beautiful singing voice and her elegant presence at all the glittery social functions. They had one child, a daughter, who died in 1895 at age 8, and her daughter's death brought about a dramatic change in Maud's life. So a friend of hers, Josephine Charlot, founder of the New York Consumers League, urged her to take a greater interest in the sufferings of working women in New York City, ostensibly as a way to free herself from her grief over the loss of her child. This is where she began her career as a social reformer and political activist. She was president of the New York Consumers League from 1897 to 1927, was vice president of the Women's Municipal League of New York. She chaired the Industrial Committee of the General Federation of Women's Clubs, and she was a member, as I said, of the Daughters of American Revolution. Her work was not focused only on exposing bad working conditions for women and children, but also focused on educating consumers. So she argued it was the consumer's responsibility to be aware of conditions in factories and sweatshops, and also to strive to be responsible shoppers on a daily basis. She also worked tirelessly for women's suffrage, as I'm going to share more with you. It was an issue that caused a rift in her family relations. Her brothers and her sister opposed the reform, while her cousin Benjamin Cardoza supported a constitutional amendment, writing Nathan that his conscience would not allow him to vote against it. Her husband Frederick shared his wife's views on equal suffrage, and he led the Men's League for Equal Suffrage, helping to organize the International Men's League at Stockholm and marching in the first suffrage parade. Newspaper accounts of conventions and demonstrations often mentioned his presence at his wife's side, occasionally referring to him as Mr. Maud Nathan. She was the first woman invited to speak at the Sephardic synagogue, Shaarei Israel, giving a talk on the heart of Judaism in 1897. Simon Nathan, Frederick Nathan's great-grandfather, was president of Shaarei Israel at one time, and the Nathan family was an important and powerful influence on the congregation. Maud Nathan called for Jews to abhor racialism, to be open-minded, and to work for social justice and reform. And her attitude toward members of her religion suggests an antipathy to religious dogma and a strong belief that religious faith is best exemplified by a commitment to social justice and tolerance of people and faiths, something we can understand pretty well. Her writing was not limited to sermons alone. She won the New York Herald Prize in 1913 for the best letter in favor of women's suffrage, and she also wrote several books. She also made 12 scrapbooks that are housed at Radcliffe College in the library there, where she had clipping services that helped to collect letters to the editor of various newspapers, accounts of demonstrations, lectures, marches, and honors. So there's a newspaper article about a public meeting at which Nathan was heckled by an anti-suffragist ex-assemblyman and the furor that followed. There were accounts of speeches and lectures, almost all of which remarked favorably on her elegant appearance and imposing demeanor. So she inhabits this world of culture and social activism. And her younger sister, Annie Nathan Meyer, promoted women's higher education, chronicled women's work, dramatized women's status in plays, novels, and short stories. She raised funds for Jewish and Black students, wrote hundreds of letters to the editor, published art, drama, and musical criticism, and championed physical activity in the outdoors. And she also, as I mentioned before, was the founder of Barnard College, New York's first liberal arts college for women. She was sincerely interested in minority rights, and because it sanctioned segregation, she resigned from the Daughters of the American Revolution. She worked with Mary White Ovington, Roy Wilkins, E.E. Just, James Weldon Johnson, and others to raise funds for Black college students. And the National Association for the Advancements of Colored People called her to resolve conflicts between Blacks and Jews. She was outspoken in anti-lynching, and it was best demonstrated by her play Black Souls, which was about miscegenation and bigotry in the Deep South. It never was a commercial success, but it garnered praise and enjoyed several readings in Harlem churches and one production by the Provincetown Players. So clearly, neither of these sisters are slouches in any size, shape, or form, and both have concerns beyond themselves. In 1933, Meyer acknowledged and finally confronted the impact of anti-Semitism in American society. She attacked Nazi policy towards the Jews, and she used the letters to the editor columns to sound the trumpet for preparedness, patriotism, and the privilege for fighting for one's country, and to bring attention to the plight of German Jews. So the historian Clapper said Maud and Annie hated each other. One was suffrage and the other was like, not me. So the activists Maud Nathan lobbied Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and Wilson and led rallies on behalf of the women's vote, while Meyer countered what she called Nathan's utterly abhorrent and noisy efforts with anti-suffrage speeches at Barnard. Like many elites, Meyer was skeptical about extending the vote to working class immigrant women. But as soon as women got the vote, she joined and became very active and involved with the League of Women Voters. So we come 100 years after the Solomons and the Jastras and Maud Nathan toasted their hard-won victory, though it was not with champagne as Prohibition began the same year. But now 100 years later, Congress now counts 127 women, split between 26 senators, 2 of whom are Jewish, and 101 representatives, 9 of whom are Jewish. Like the silent sentinels a century earlier, female and Jewish newcomers are enthusing some and unnerving others, with positions and alliances considered radical in some quarters. There's a continuity of Jewish women's activism in these 140 plus years. I want to close with Judith Rosenbaum's wish for the suffrage movement on its 100-year mark, that we learn from the successes of women in the past and we draw on what history has to teach us. So it was a fair amount of content, but hopefully flushed out some of the things about some of these people who were real people and admirable in what they did. I think these 2 sisters particularly, with so much commitment on so many things and yet such differences in this area. So as opposed to telling the usual kind of Jewish stories, I figured sometimes telling the stories about the interactions in families and the struggles and the ways that things change. I mean, I think it's interesting, so many of these women, a number of them were all daughters of rabbis. And at that time, they were mainly Orthodox rabbis. So the path and the involvement of Jewish women in different causes along the way is one that has quite a legacy and offers us the challenge of how we choose to continue that as we move forward. So we are going to continue with Havdalah. So hopefully you have your candles and your wine or juice in your spice box, or else you can at least figuratively or somehow, see and share with the others of us in our flames as well. So we'll light our candles to start. Do it with the other hand and I'll get it lit, I think. Not quite. Did you have better luck with your candles than I had with mine? Okay. I want to put the words in the chat so that everybody can have the words in front of you so that we can do the prayers and the blessings together. So one more second.
It's not there yet.
That just tells how many people. No, that just tells how
No,
many
this is the
people.
chat.
Yes, click it.
There's nothing
Trust me.
there.
Okay, so now you should be able to, now you can see them in the side.
Wow.
Press send and it helps, right? So you can join with me with the blessings, and we will enjoy bidding the end of the Shabbat together. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. La 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. If you don't have a candle there, you can put your hands forward to symbolically towards the candles that we have, as you're supposed to try to see the reflection of the flames in your reflection in your nails. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben yom hashvi'i l'sheshet yamei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. So as we have the warmth of and the light of the candle, the sweetness of the wine of the juice, and the sweet smell of the spices to savor as we leave Shabbat and move into the week, we're almost ready to bid farewell to Shabbat after you take a sip of your wine or juice. And we put the candle out in the wine. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimera v'yameinu, Yavo Eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi. And I want to invite you to unmute so we can sing Shavua Tov together. We trade off the hearing it all as one or hearing the bit of a delay. It's almost like a repeat after me kind of a thing here. Shavua Tov, wishing everyone a good week. Shavua Tov, 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 a good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. We wish everyone a Shavua Tov, a good week, and wish everyone on Facebook a good week, and we'll be here same time, same place next week. So we will, a moment here.